Hello and welcome to InRetroSpect Shots. This is the final episode of us covering this year's E3. My name's Peter Willington, by the way. I should probably introduce myself. I'm joined by Dan Frost.
Hello, Mr. Peter Willington. I am here.
Hello.
Ready to chat.
Hi. And I'm also joined by Sam Turner.
Right.
We're going to have a chat, a more general conversation about E3 now that it's, for us, basically, all the excitement is over. What's Nintendo got? It's got a new platformer starring a fat Italian plumber. E3. A more general conversation. So let's crack up.
Do you know that crack off is like a euphemism for something else?
Okay.
Your enthusiasm is truly infectious.
Your enthusiasm. It shouldn't be
for
that
for the high point of the gaming year.
Do you know, guys, E3 comes and goes very quickly, I agree with you, but do you know what else is on at the same time? WWDC. And for me, that's been a slightly more, we'll talk about this later, that's been a slightly more interesting show for me. I feel like E3 has kind of sapped it out of me. There's not been a huge amount of stuff that I've got massively excited for. But then I always kind of feel like this after an E3. I'm always a little bit disappointed that there wasn't the absolutely gigantic reveal that really sort of gets my gaming tickles my gaming muscle. So what I wanted to talk about was just a few of the games that we haven't really managed to cover that much recently. So let's kind of start off with Nintendo's offerings, if we might, because they decided this year not to take part in E3, and I think personally it was probably a good thing that they didn't.
It was my prediction on the first one of these shows that we did that I thought that's a really wise move. They didn't need. I thought that they didn't need to do the big conference. They didn't need to have the cheers and the claps and the crowd as they announced everything. I thought that they'd be much better off just doing their little low-key Nintendo Direct address.
And I thought that Nintendo had given up.
No, but no, Dad. They haven't given up, but it was just it. Yeah, they shouldn't have done it.
It was. If they had tried to stretch it to an hour and a half or 2 hour long conference, like Microsoft or Sony did, I think this would have been a very, very, very embarrassing E3 for Nintendo. There simply wasn't that much stuff shown off that was particularly exciting, particularly groundbreaking, or essentially no new IPs from Nintendo. Again, we're sort of, I guess it's to be expected.
There was the Wonderful 101. Is that
Wonderful 101 is not a Nintendo
all right,
game.
I see.
There are
no new IPs being made by Nintendo.
Yes, I should say, by being made by Nintendo. They are doubling down again on all of their old franchises. And some of them are perfectly acceptable, and some of them are a little bit ludicrous. So, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is a game that I'm particularly excited about. I just reviewed the 3DS version of Donkey Kong Country Returns, and
it's very good.
It's very good, isn't it? Yes, you're playing it at the moment, aren't you?
I am playing it at the moment, yeah. My 3DS is actually... This is one of the reasons I was excited about the Nintendo Direct E3, was that my 3DS has received a bit of a resurgence. I always find this happens during the Vita. I'll play that for a long time, then something will come out on the 3DS that I like, and I've been playing Bit Trip Saga and Donkey Kong Returns 3D and enjoying both of them, richly. I think they're both incredible handheld titles.
I absolutely agree with you. But I'm excited for Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze because I like hardcore platformers, and the 3DS version and the Wii version are very, very tough. And this looks, from what we saw in the gameplay videos, this is, again, going to be following those lines of here's a tough game for you to complete. There's also a Xenoblade sequel in X, which kind of... I never played Xenoblade. It was a sort of critical darling, sort of action RPG, but it's not particularly exciting looking. You can jump into robots and you can fly them about and fight monsters in an open world RPG. It looks fine. It looks decent enough for the people that bought that game. But again, I don't think that's going to get too much traction in the West. And then, so again, they're sort of doubling down on these. Mario Kart 8, a new Mario Party game, and Wii U Fit is going to be out as well. But the two that I kind of thought to myself, this is absolutely ridiculous now, and it was kind of epitomized for me. Nintendo's E3 showing is Super Mario 3D World, so a game which was 3D on the 3DS and specifically was a part, it was a Super Mario game that was trying to do interesting and new things with the 3D, and now it's coming to Wii U where it doesn't have the ability to render anything in 3D.
Yeah, but you can be a cat.
You can be a cat. This is true. Nintendo wins E3 on that now, I feel. They're sort of talking about how it's going to be a bit more Super Mario Brothers 2 in its feel. You're going to have, Toad can run faster, Princess Peach can float, Luigi does his little scraggly leg thing where he floats in the air a little bit, and Mario is just Mario. But that for me, that kind of felt like Nintendo going, oh my goodness me, we need to make money, we need to make games, let's just do another Super Mario. Oh, we can't do new Super Mario Brothers again, and we're not ready to do a mainline Mario game, so I guess we'll sort of try and retcon like this Super Mario 3D Land into a series and franchise all of its own. And I was rather upset by that. And just to kind of carry on from that, was Super Smash Brothers, which is again a series that I'm not got a lot of interest in, and it's pretty flipping telling when the new character, the newest, most recognizable IP you have to put into your sort of premiere fighting game on the system is the lady from Wii Fit. It's
what, the yoga lady.
The yoga lady is going. That is the newest IP that Nintendo can come up with to put into their fighting game, and also it's going to have Villager from Animal Crossing, which made me relatively excited actually about that. I thought they were going to announce an Animal Crossing on Wii U, and I reached into my back pocket and nearly had to take out 300 quid to buy that and the console. But I don't know. I don't know about you guys. I'm getting really apathetic towards what Nintendo's doing in the sort of home console space.
Yeah, I mean, it did strike of that. I mean, it was in a way it was a very old-fashioned address. Prior to that Nintendo Direct, we were getting very used to the turn of phrase. Remember, this is running on an in-game engine. This is rendering in-game, and the first thing you were shown on the Nintendo Direct conference essentially does not represent real game footage, because they were showing off Pokemon X and Y, and that's all fair enough. But in terms of a hardware thing, it already feels like the Wii U has essentially lost that technical battle, and I think they always knew that when they're bringing it out anyway. But for me, what summed up that conference was when they panned around the room, and it was this huge, massive conference room somewhere in Japan, and it was absolutely, completely empty. And in a way, I think I would be more hyped up by that conference if there was just the people sitting in there, the thousands of people sitting and whooping and stuff like that. Because there was stuff in the Sony and the Xbox One conference which were on par with terms of, we're bringing out another one of this game, we're bringing out another, hey, you know that IP, we're bringing that back. But because you've got 3,000 people going, woo, yeah, woo, yeah, that's infectious. But this was just all preached to an empty room, to utter silence.
Yeah.
And that kind of makes you, like, the echoes of that just bounce around the room, and you kind of think, will Nintendo be at next year's E3?
I genuinely...
As a hardware publisher.
I think as a hardware publisher, absolutely. I think that they're going to absolutely continue to support the 3DS. They're going to, I think they're going to really try and push on handheld because they're getting some really good returns on what they're doing at the moment. And it's a system for them that is improving. It is getting a larger fan base. Yeah. But with
I think rather than saying will they be at E3, I reckon they probably will be at E3 because they do physically still have products to sell. But I would ask the question of, looking at where things stand now, and you still put them up there with the likes of Sony and Microsoft because that's the level that they are at. How do they come back from this now? Can they come back from this and return to where they were? They used to be on a par with Sony and Microsoft. Now they're no longer that anymore. You could see most definitely from this E3, this shouted it from the rooftops where they now stand.
Dan, the question you're really asking is, are Nintendo the next Sega?
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
I think this is absolutely the question on a lot of people's lips at the moment. This is if you look at what Sega was doing at the time. Nintendo's made a lot of money off the Wii. They have very deep pockets at the moment. They've got at least 4 or 5 more years of potentially pretty significant losses that they can make before there's some serious shake-up that needs to happen. But when you're looking at a trio of consoles that have come out from them, home consoles that have come out from them, that haven't hit home at all with the sort of long-lasting, what you might call a core gamer, GameCube, Wii U. The Wii did really well. It's just that it in terms of hardware sales, but it certainly wouldn't have done well in terms of software sales. And the GameCube just came third. It was a sort of second, third place run between that and Xbox. And the Wii U at the moment, it's not a conversation. It's not a conversation at E3 about the next generation. People, you hear a lot of people talking about, I'm very, very excited about the next generation. Which next gen platform are you going to get? People aren't talking about the Wii U in those same ways. They're not referring to it as a next generation system because it's not. And it's.
If you were to think of how you're going to play a certain game that's coming out on all 3 platforms, you're not going to find anyone that's going to say, I'm going to get it on Wii U.
Yeah.
Batman Arkham Origins is going to come out on every single platform known to man. And yet, I doubt I'd be able to find anybody who would say, no, I'm going to get it on the Wii U. You'll get it on the Xbox, you'll get it on the PlayStation, you'll get it on the Vita, chances are, before you'll get it on the Wii U. And that's where they stand, basically, at the moment. Nintendo have Mario, and that's it.
And it's a system that's losing its exclusives by the moment. We've just found out that Deus Ex 3 Super Fancy Pants Edition, whatever it's called, Director's Cut, that is now going multi-platform.
Yeah.
And
Rayman Legends it wasn't lost. EA's backing of it.
EA's supposedly not got anything in development, and and the worst of this is there was a post up on, I think it was MCV, where FIFA 14 is coming to every platform excluding Wii U, and those systems include PlayStation 2. It's coming to the PlayStation 2 and not the Wii U. That's that's really indicative of a console that's in some serious bother. And when you come out on stage and in front of an empty auditorium, and you're talking about Mario Kart 8 like it's an exciting thing to get amped up about, I'm sorry, but that's not good enough.
Well, I didn't watch the Nintendo Direct straight away. I know, Sam, you did, and I spoke to you. And we talked kind of in brief about it, and I predicted what the games were going to be. And it was going to be Mario, it was going to be Zelda, it was going to be Donkey Kong, it was going to be Pikmin, Pokemon. And I basically named just from my own impression of what I knew Nintendo would come up with. And I could predict every single game they were going to produce. Even ones that hadn't already been announced, I assumed you would get a new Mario, and you did. You got all those ones that we already knew are always going to come out. Pretty much every E3, you can announce something. And it's got boring now. There's no excitement in it.
The problem is that Nintendo are kind of in a vicious circle of, releasing hardware and using their known franchises to sell it. But it's at that point where how much money do they take creating new Nintendo IPs when their other ones will sell, and they have a track record of selling, and they will sell a few units of the consoles. And is it worth it when, and let's not beat around the bush, Nintendo are in a little bit of financial difficulties? I mean, didn't the president have to take a quite hefty pay cut or something like that?
Yeah.
So that's why they do it, because they're financially bankable and they're cheaper to create. They've already got all the assets lying around and the licenses to do it, so they might as well do it. And as I said before, Sony, and when we talked before E3, we could pretty much name there's going to be another Assassin's Creed game and another Halo game and Call of Duty and Infamous and Killzone. Every single games maker has these titles.
But it's a disappointing, or at least a couple of years ago, I would have found it unthinkable that I would be more excited about a sequel to Peggle being announced than a new Super Mario platformer. That is extremely
where are some of the more different games that did come out on the Wii? Your likes of your Mad World or your No More Heroes. Where are these games? Why aren't we seeing any of these? It's not been around for as long as the Wii was, but Wii U's still been around for a fair amount of time to be introducing these kind of things. Yes, we've heard of Bayonetta 2, but that's about it. We've seen nothing else.
They're not being made simply because they don't sell. They're not able to kind of hit a target audience because there isn't a big enough install base. Core gamers aren't particularly interested and don't own one, so they may as well go to another platform. And it's not like any of these games are using that they're using the Wii U's tablet, the controller, the one thing that makes it particularly interesting. Yeah. The thing, that is a system more than ever that is being held up by Nintendo, producing new games for it based on existing franchises and re-releasing and reselling its users the same content. This is why when the Wii was coming out and people were sort of saying, how expensive are these virtual console games going to be, and will they transfer to the next console? The reason that they aren't coming over to a native Wii U menu, you can still access the Wii's menu, but it's an absolute faff. But the reason that it's not all coming through to you and that you don't have the same unified account is because Nintendo is banking on selling you the same stuff again to keep itself afloat. This is a company that has got to look forward to, has got Assassin's Creed 4 and Watch Dogs, and those are footnotes at the end of other conferences. These, but with Nintendo, it's look at third parties supporting us. How fantastic is that? And to other companies, it's like, we don't care. We've got 15 brand new IPs coming out. We've got we've got Ready at Dawn making a kick-ass looking new game. We've got we've got Naughty Dog clearly, squirreling away at something. We've got Naughty Dog still working on our old platform, which is arguably just as powerful as Nintendo's new one, that has just created one of the most critically acclaimed video games of all time. And what's Nintendo got? It's got a new platformer starring a fat Italian plumber. It's not 1994 anymore.
That's a funny statement to make, but that's exactly true. That's all they have.
Unfortunately,
and it doesn't stand up anymore.
Yeah,
it just doesn't stand up anymore.
I think that this year's E3 will be the one where I think I did get it right, and my prediction was correct in the first show, because that Nintendo Direct one is the most memorable out of all of the Sony and Xbox and E3 and Ubisoft, but unfortunately memorable for all the wrong reasons.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to something that made me extremely happy, because we barely have got to talk about this so far.
Can me and Sam guess at what it is?
Dan?
Well, I'm going to go. I'm going to say it's a first-person title.
Right.
I'm going to guess that it's probably going to come to across numerous platforms.
Okay.
And I imagine that it will have a very striking colour scheme of lots of whites and reds.
Right. That doesn't sound like Just Dance 2014 to me. I'm just joshing with you, Dan. It is, of course, Mirror's Edge 2. Finally.
Well, you say finally, but EA did say it'll only be released when it's ready.
Do you know what, though? Yes. Now, I watched this trailer and I thought to myself, initially my reaction to that was, you cheeky buggers. You've been working on this for a while. Everyone knows that you have. But, you're not prepared to give us a date. Now, I kind of then... And this might just be the fact, what's that syndrome called, where you're taken capture by your...
Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah, this might just be Stockholm Syndrome. But, I've been waiting so long for this, just for EA to come out and confirm and say, it's all right, guys, we totally are working on this. Just for them to confirm that makes me go, good.
And
good.
I think this is not... I don't think this is EA pushing this anymore. I think that from what EA showed at their conference, the majority of it was just basketball, a thing called Bounce Tech, which surely was in a basketball game before it was in the new NBA Live 14 one. New FIFA, EA Sports, UFC, Madden, NFL 25. That's pretty much the bulk of the conference. The rest of it was all being made by DICE. So... you got a new Battlefield 4. EA going to start pumping out all the games that Disney are going to let them make. Mm-hmm. So Star Wars Battlefront is another DICE title. I reckon someone at DICE has gone, look, can we make the game we really want to make now? You've let us do all this, 2 Battlefields, a new Star Wars game. Can we make Mirror's Edge 2? And someone at EA has gone... all right, here's a little bit of money. When you've got some free time, just shove it out there. So that's what I think has happened. DICE have earned their right to make Mirror's Edge 2, and someone begrudgingly at EA has given them some money to do it.
I think you're absolutely on the money. DICE have been consistently EA's most critically adored developer. Yes, EA Sports team knocks it out of the park every single year. However much you want to complain about, the game not changing massively.
I'm sure Bounce Tech is really good.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's incredible.
I'm sure
people are going to play both NBA Live and NBA 14.
Absolutely.
And go, bloody hell, that ball is bouncing like...
oh, look at that. And it hasn't got that LeBron guy talking to himself. So... but I do feel like DICE have kind of earned it, and there were definitely problems with Mirror's Edge. There absolutely were, and however much I love it, I am one of those people who some of my favourite games are 6 and 7s out of 10s. You know, like they are poor in some places, but lovable in others. And you know, just to know that, you know, Faith is back, that it's supposedly going to be it's going to be a reboot apparently, or at least that's kind of the word that's floating about at the moment. You know, I like that. That's fine. I'm happy for them to do whatever. I wasn't, you know, I really like the story that was presented in Mirror's Edge, but it wasn't so massive that, you know, it's not like we've got 4 games in and now they're like, oh, we're not going to end it. You know, it's okay. I'm okay with that. I think the fact that they're keeping to that visual style of very high contrast color in a, you know, scrubbed, clean, beautiful landscape, that's the important part to me. And it's funny, Sam, that you should mention Star Wars Battlefront, because I was going to come on to that. Have any of us sort of played Battlefront?
I've not, no.
Okay, so have you played Battlefield?
Yeah.
Right. So Star Wars Battlefront is basically Battlefield, but with Star Wars. So
all right, it's going to be that multiplayer thing, people taking charge of
vehicles,
different sides and vehicles, and yeah.
And while I was watching the Battlefield 4 stuff, a lot of the stuff that was kind of coming out of all this, you know, I was getting really flipping tired of just how much sort of grit and gore and, you know, the dark middle chapter sort of rubbish that was sort of coming out of this. And that's got its place and everything. And it's great that games are telling, like, you know, hard stories now. And I'll definitely play something like Witcher 3, and I'll definitely play Metal Gear and all this sort of stuff. But when I looked at Battlefield and when I look at all of these modern military shooters, you know, the disconnect is so minimal. You know, it feels like it is, you know, it often feels like you are kind of there, or it is something that is going towards this feeling that you are there. And actually, I really like the idea of Battlefield, but I don't like the idea of shooting up other human beings. You know, like I don't like the idea of being in real combat zones. So for DICE to be in charge of Battlefront, that to me makes so much sense. Like, yes, like I don't want to kill somebody with an MP5, but I absolutely do want to wander around in an AT-AT on Hoth shooting rebels with lasers. I'd love that. I'd absolutely love to do that. And that makes me the bad guy, but like brilliant. Like that's totally what I'm up for. So I'm personally very excited about that. Was there anything else from EA that you guys were excited about? You know, I know you guys like the FIFA games. Is that exciting, or is that a bit of a known quantity for you?
In terms of being released, they tend to be a known quantity. There's only so much they can show you because it's so much in the feel of when you're playing a game. Often you'll see a game and it looks the same, but as soon as you kind of get it in your controller, get the controller in your hands, you think, oh my God, this is like a completely different game to what I've played. So it's difficult to say. What they've said sounds fun, sounds good, sounds really interesting. How much effect that makes. I mean, from what I hear, a lot of the things coming out of the new FIFA is that it is quite a departure from what's happened in the past, over the past few years. I think there's every now and again you get one game that shifts it in another direction in some form. What
can you do now? Pick up the ball?
Yeah, that's what it is.
It'll be the thing about showing FIFA is Dan's absolutely right. It's all about how you interact with the game and how it feels from it. FIFA's long past the stars in their eyes moment that I like to call it. You know that the stars in their eyes when everyone needs to speak to Matthew Kelly.
This is
off topic, but okay.
It's not off topic.
This is probably one to explain for our American listeners.
Right, Stars in Their Eyes was a
sure they have a version.
Was a British show where a guy who has now become a second-rate actor in Sheffield used to, basically it was a karaoke competition, and people would come on and they'd say, hi Matthew, this guy was born in Memphis, he built a home out of all of his money and he died on the toilet. I'm going to be Elvis. And they go through this door, come out the other side, loads of smoke, and they'd be dressed as Elvis. They'd sing one line, everyone would clap, and then basically there'll be a winner who was the best impressionist. But there was always one stars in their eyes moment where Matthew Kelly would go, "How did you end up finding that you could sing like this person?" He'd always go, and it would always be something like, "I was singing in the shower and my mum went, 'Hey Jerry, turn off that radio!'" Now, every game has a stars in their eyes moment. That point where your mum comes into the room and goes, oh, is this on TV, is it? Because that's happened to me at FIFA. Now, my point was, before you took me off topic, was that FIFA have had for ages that stars in their eyes moment. Multiple times, from like FIFA 08, maybe even to 10, someone's come into the room and gone, "Oh, are you watching football on telly?" So 14 is going to be interesting in that respect because there's only so much graphical work they can do. So how much of a departure it's going to be, but that's really difficult to show until it's on the show floor. So something like Eurogamer later this year will be quite interesting for quite a lot of EA stuff, I think. Does that explain it? Was that enough?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I totally get it. Yeah.
I barely watched Stars in Her Eyes, but yes, I think I'm fixating too much on the Stars in Her Eyes.
Yeah, that wasn't the point of the conversation.
I understood the statement you were making, Sam. Don't worry.
So here's something else interesting to come on to. Ubisoft announced Rocksmith 2014. Which is going to be another rhythm action game.
It is, but it's not really rhythm action. Well, it is. You are performing actions at a certain rhythm. But the idea with Rocksmith is you actually learn how to play guitar to some sort of degree.
Yeah. So, cool idea. Interesting, interesting technology. But is this really a genre that we want coming into the next generation? It felt to me, again, sort of indicative of an industry that has spent so long in the same in the same sort of generation that because we've seen so much innovation, so many different types of genres come in, and even die within the same generation, it almost feels like a throwback. I don't.
A little bit. I think just the Rocksmith thing is it's such an easy product to license, both in terms of the tracks you give away, the artists you get on board, and obviously the guitar that you need to sell with the product. And for both games companies and music labels, that's just another way of getting their product out there. But when you're talking about genres dying, I think that Ubisoft are putting a lot of money into the RPG persistent online world genre thriving on the new consoles. This is a list of the games that Ubisoft showed at E3 this year. So Rocksmith, fair enough. Watch Dogs, Just Dance, and Rabbids Invasion. So 4 games that they showed. So all of those, one's a third-person action game, dancing game, one's a little party game for kids, and one's a guitar-playing game. The rest of them, The Mighty Quest for Epic Loot, an RPG PC online game. South Park Stick of Truth, that's an RPG game. The Crew, a multiplayer persistent online world game. Trials Fusion / Frontier, a mobile and console going out and about multiplayer game. And Tom Clancy's The Division, an open world RPG. So the majority, probably 70% of their whole games, their new games that Ubisoft are bringing out for the next gen, are RPG online and multiplayer games. As obviously that's the genre they're going for.
It's this connected generation. The fact that there are so many more ways to sort of get online, and homes do feel now more connected with high-speed broadband than ever before. The fact that Xbox One is so, the internet is so intrinsic to it. It does feel like developers are sort of taking advantage of the cloud, and they are taking advantage of multiplayer, and they are trying to find ways of keeping you invested in the same game for longer. And I feel like that's probably going to be a good thing. You look at something like Disney Infinity, which is, I feel is a similar sort of thing. It's obviously there's the toy collection aspect to it, but it's trying to keep you in the game for longer by being every game to every man.
Yeah, didn't I hear the other day that Activision have made more money off Skylanders than they have off Call of Duty?
I doubt they might have made more money, but I doubt they've made as much profit. I'd have to double check that, but I know that Call of Duty is the most profitable franchise.
But it's up there, though, isn't it? It's like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
They make shed loads of money. Activision's a company with Call of Duty, Skylanders, and World of Warcraft, StarCraft. They are absolutely kicking ass in terms of money. But there was nothing really from Activision that I looked at and went, that's really interesting. There was it's Destiny that they're publishing, isn't it? Which I can never remember. Is it Destiny? There's the other one as well. There's Destiny and there's Titanfall, and I get those two mixed up.
Destiny is Bungie, Titanfall is Respawn.
Right. Okay. But I mean, so Activision to me, they haven't really come out with anything at E3 that's really rocked my world and sort of gone, oh, that's really cool. But I suppose again, it's not really that surprising, is it? It's in exactly the same way that Rockstar hasn't really shown anything that's an unknown quantity. They wanted all of the focus on Grand Theft Auto 5. So what else, guys? Like, we kind of run through the big publishers, really. What else is there that really piqued our interest, or conversely, are we a little bit more subdued by the whole thing?
I think there's one thing that really sort of piqued my interest, and it's the movement of two really prominent developers for the individual consoles. And it started in the Xbox One conference, in the Microsoft one. And it was when Insomniac announced that their new game, Sunset Overdrive, would be an exclusive for Microsoft. And I kind of thought, wow, Insomniac are a team who have pretty much, other than Fuse, which bombed, have not really made any other games other than for Sony. You go right back to Spyro, pretty much came out day one for the PS1, very early in that lifespan. Ratchet and Clank, Resistance, all games that have found homes and been lovingly flourished and embraced by Sony Computer Entertainment Europe. Something's happened. That relationship must have broken down, or Microsoft have offered them some sort of freedom or development that they haven't been able to get elsewhere. And I found that really, really interesting. Even more so when suddenly Bungie come out and suddenly say, hey, we're in bed with Sony now. That Microsoft, who we used to produce games for and hits and come out with fighting for the Xbox whenever they came out with a new generation, yeah, we're going to make it for that as well. But really, where you want to play this game, and Activision are saying this as well, and I've got a quote from it, that the PlayStation, the Sony exec at the time, said they've got a long-term exclusive partnership with Bungie and Activision over that Destiny universe. And to have the worldwide gameplay premiere showing on the PS4 floor for a company like Bungie, that, for me, those switching relationships between Insomniac and Bungie, between the two things, is really interesting. And I think that, and read into this what you want, I think Sony have made a good choice.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Insomniac is a company that's kind of on its. It really needs a hit. Basically, it really needs to pull a hit out of its arse, because the Ratchet and Clank games, while good, are absolutely getting less good, and the things that they are trying with that brand aren't working out. And what Bungie's doing is producing the first-person shooter that Sony wants, because it understands that Killzone really isn't like no one cares about Killzone to the extent that they'll ever care about, a Call of Duty or something like that.
No.
But yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. I think that's an absolutely fascinating move, and it'll be interesting to see how sort of like allegiances shift as we move into this new generation. Dan, obviously, I've put the boot in enough about Shenmue 3. You're not having it.
I'd say it's a sad day, but it's been a sad 10 years. I will never give up.
It's tough being you, Dan, isn't it? It really is. Dan wakes up every morning, he turns over to his fiancée, and she kisses it.
I was going to do as well.
She kisses him on the head and goes, "Oh, Dan, I love being with you. You're the light of my life. You're absolutely perfect and you're wonderful. Are you happy being with me?" And Dan, you look at her with tears in your eyes, and you go, "When will there be another Shenmue? When? When will there be another Shenmue?"
Not this
You
year.
weren't there. You don't know what it felt like to finish Shenmue 2 and to know you'll never see what happens. It's still sitting on my shelf.
I did see it the other day. I came to visit you the other day and I saw Shenmue and I thought, I reckon you should play it again, Dan. Then they'd know.
I was clearing some stuff out the other day and I found my old Dreamcast. And there was a problem before where the top wouldn't close, so I couldn't replay any games. And I managed to fix it. And I was really happy because my first thought was, well, I'm going onto eBay and buying the original Shenmue. Done.
Nice. But what that was, and has any chance of actually ever coming out, was good for you? What was exciting for you at the conference?
I have to say, I mean, we've just been talking about the likes of Ubisoft, Nintendo, EA, and we're saying, do we feel a little flat? Do we feel a bit maybe underwhelmed? I don't feel underwhelmed. What I do feel is a little bit exhausted from the big hitters of Xbox and PlayStation 4. I think that's why I may not feel as excited as I would have otherwise, because that has been such a huge thing of this conference and of this whole expo. And it has overshadowed everything else. I mean, there's a few bright spots, something like a Mirror's Edge coming out. The other thing, I mean, personally, Destiny, I really like seeing Destiny because I really like what Bungie are doing. But yeah, there was the one, you needed something big to kind of break through the dominance of the two, Sony and Microsoft. And very few games were big enough to do that. And it's difficult because if they are big enough, then they get segued into the Microsoft and Sony showings. Mm-hmm. I mean, Watch Dogs, as I said in one of our I think it was yesterday's, the PlayStation 4 podcast we did, I'm a little bit tired of Watch Dogs now. I have not played it, but I've just seen it. The information out there and the videos out there are just constantly coming out, and I'm seeing the same thing over and over again, and I'm a bit bored by it. And it does, you mentioned before it being like an Assassin's Creed, and that's what it feels like at the moment. I'm not a big fan of Assassin's Creed because it does feel quite samey, and after a while I get a bit bored with it. And the more I see Watch Dogs, because I'm seeing so much of it, I'm getting tired of it, and that's what's kind of ruining it. So that's not a big thing for me anymore.
Do you think
that was huge?
Do you think what this E3 maybe could have done with was just a little tease of GTA 5 for one of them just to go, hey, look, boom, here's a little minute teaser. Here's a little bit of gameplay.
I think what this needed, possibly something like that wasn't expected. But I think what it needed was, outside of your two big hitters, the two big kind of two new platform reveals, something left field, something really out of the blue. We talk about Mirror's Edge 2. Pretty much we all knew it was going to be there. Yes, we weren't 100%, but it all sounded like we would see it somewhere. The question would be, where were we going to see it? Was it going to be Microsoft? Was it going to be Sony? Turned out to be neither. Just going to go with EA. I think you needed something away from the big partners and just really out of left field. Something like, go back to a Shenmue, to come out of left field, come out of nowhere, that everyone would be like, wow, where did that come from? And there wasn't anything like that. Don't get me wrong, I knew Shenmue was never going to happen. But something at that kind of scale, I think, would have made us still excited about it. Because once you've got through those two things, and they're exhausting, Microsoft and Sony, once you're past that, there's nothing else to keep you up at that level. Because everything else, nothing quite lived up to those first two say the first two conferences, because obviously they weren't the first two, but the two big ones, nothing quite lived up to that. And I think that's maybe why I personally feel a little bit flat about it. I think looking back in the future, I'll look back and think, yeah, this is a great show. I do think it is a great show, and I think it's probably it's better than last year. I think because of the platforms and the new excitement on that, especially, as I said yesterday, especially with Sony, I think Sony's was a great showing. But it could have. I just needed that little bit more. When we started these podcasts, one of the first things I said was that what I always feel with E3 is that it's always great, but it's not quite great enough. There's never that big oh my god moment, and it's the same for this one. I don't have that oh my god moment, which I really always want.
Well, I just before we do kind of round out the discussion, I just wanted to kind of touch on one of the things that really made me question where the sort of current technology is going, and the thing that was most exciting for me that was kind of announced around the last couple of days wasn't even at E3. It was at WWDC, which is Apple's own conference where they sort of get developers together and talk about Apple devices and where iOS is going and that sort of thing. And they talked about iOS 7 being relaunched, and they sort of showed that off, and that's all fine and stuff. But the most exciting news is the fact that iPhones are going to start getting controllers, like actual gameplay controllers, and Apple is going to support it at the API level. So, there is going to be if you want to make an Apple controller, you must hit, this series of check marks. And that's going to bring a fair amount of standardization to, an already emerging market where you've got iCade and you've got, I think Mad Catz are doing something at the moment as well. And it means that suddenly you can do all of these traditional games again. And we've already had this period of creativity on the iPhone and touch gaming and that sort of thing. And now we can start bringing in these traditional controls again and sort of seeing where that interesting blend comes together. I can't wait to be able to play a first-person shooter on my iPhone again, like in a way that I actually feel is satisfying.
It's funny because we've talked. There's been a lot of rumors in the past about Apple launching some kind of gaming setup, maybe through an iTV or something like that. And by releasing these controllers, they've basically done that without having to go into the R&D of creating a new console. And it's by just giving you a controller, the games that I can play now, I can take with me anywhere. Depending on obviously size-wise, I can sit on a bus with my iPad, plug the controller in. I probably won't do this, and play a Halo. I'm spitballing here, but you look at a Modern Warfare, which is basically Call of Duty.
Just get a Vita.
Well, this is the thing. Now, at the moment, like I really enjoy playing on my Vita. I'm absolutely loving my 3DS at the moment. Like that is barely leaving my side because of Animal Crossing mainly. But yeah, I'm absolutely loving. I'm man enough to admit it.
I have to say one thing about that, Pete. Every time I see the advert on television for Animal Crossing,
I haven't seen it yet.
It's basically like a 21-year-old woman walking along a beach, playing that with these like nice, pretty music playing in the background, lying on a sofa, and then it comes to the end and it shows you Animal Crossing. And you can also get these limited edition polka dot or pink DS.
I really want that.
I look at that and I think, that's Pete's favourite game.
It's absolutely
You're
fantastic.
really not their demographic, are you?
No, not at all. But the 3DS, between that and Donkey Kong and a couple of other titles at the moment, I'm revisiting a few DS games as well. Like that system's not really left my side. But this controller that's being added for iOS, and that will mean iPhone and iPad and iPod Touch. This is one further step towards convergence of all of these devices. Your home console is going to be your portable, and it's also going to be your phone. And with mirroring, like on the television, for example, like streaming through another device, the fact that I can take these big experiences with me anywhere I go, but also have these small experiences as well on the single device. Like, that's really exciting. And yeah, at the moment, if you want to have a really big experience like that, you've got to go grab a Vita. But it's very easy to see where all of this is going, where Apple actually does make a play for video games, because even now, even with all this stuff, this gamepad is one of the first things that they've really shown where they're like, yeah, games might be a thing we might be interested in. So this, Apple is coming, and I think that
I don't think I agree with you in a sense, but after seeing what we've seen at E3, I don't think it's a sense that Apple is coming. I think that Apple are embracing with open arms. Because I don't think that Apple are going to necessarily produce a games console, but Sony definitely hinted at it at the end of their conference in terms of their links with Gaikai and the cloud gaming, and they didn't say anything, and it was exactly the same with the Vita. They referenced the fact that you will be able to play PS4 games on the Vita screen wherever you are in the home using remote play over Wi-Fi. So it's generally, that gamepad of the Wii U idea. But they also hinted at the end, by using Gaikai and cloud-based computing, they showed at the end of the conference pictures of mobile phones and tablets. And I think, Apple see that and they can go, the best way to play your Sony streaming and Microsoft streaming games are on an Apple device, because hey, we've got a controller that you can play it with.
It's possible. I'm that if you want something exciting from me, this
That's all we ask.
This more exciting technology, like the real technological advancements for me at E3 this year, ironically, are not PlayStation 4 and they are not Xbox One. What they are is the way that those consoles integrate mobile and tablet and things that you have always got on you a bit more. It's the joining up of different technologies that is the most exciting. It's not one single technology from the show. But let us talk about two single technologies from the show to round this out. I'm loath to be one of these people who asks this question, and we barely ever ask this type of question on InRetroSpect if you are a new listener, but it must be asked, who won E3?
We won.
The consumer.
I've been waiting ages to say that.
I know it's a bit of a cop out, but obviously we did. We will see the actual improvements of all of this. It's great that we're going to move up in a new generation of technology. Some of the games, yes, we were coming to this brilliant part where games were becoming absolutely incredible because they had to compete. But it'd be great to sort of reset some of that and go into a new generation and see people try new things. But what I kind of want to get from you is, out of the big three, Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, what was the company that most kind of left you with a smile on your face, made you excited for games?
I still have a niggling theory that Microsoft have ideas unbeknownst to us for their console to be a success in the very, very in quite the far future. I think that something will happen and their console will just blossom and everyone will go, of course we always wanted to be connected. Of course this is the way we want to use games. I think something like that will happen. But for the time being, for what I want from a console in the near future, and Chris talked about that cinematography, that moment of those indie gamers and indie developers all standing on that stage at once, and the pan cameras across everyone and everyone's cheering and youping. That for me is when it suddenly struck the key. And you talk about mobile experiences and you talk about going on the sort of a journey and being able to take games with you, and that just sort of, that makes sense to me, Sony. That approach makes sense going into the future, and that's what kind of made me a bit more happy about their console and the direction that they want to take it.
Going into E3, as we kind of said in our pre-E3 show, I anticipated Nintendo not even making an impact. In my opinion, that's kind of come to fruition. So for me, it's between.
Hang
on, wait there.
We all know you're right. You don't need to say it again. We don't need to bring it up again. We all know you're right. It's fine. You win.
So for me, it was always going to be between Xbox and PS4. And before the show, I had a sneaky feeling that Xbox were going to win it. That's because I thought, basically, they, as I said before, they were going to come in, going to play all their games. They're going to leave everyone saying, "Oh my god, that's amazing! Get out!" and then leave Sony to say, "Well, we have to do this. We have to do this."
Get out! Get out!
Sony would have to come in and give all this stuff that nobody really wanted to hear, all the stuff about entertainment hubs and TV stuff. But I have to say, Microsoft did do their part just as I thought they would. But Sony absolutely knocked it out the park. They really did. Other than one or two missteps, television, they pretty much hit everything on the nose. I think maybe the games that they showed weren't quite at the level of Xbox, but that was mainly because they'd already shown all their big games before, so we were watching them again. There was a lot of third-party titles, the likes of Assassin's Creed and Watch Dogs, which we'd already seen before. I loved seeing the indie aspects. As we've talked before, Oddworld is one of my favourite series. The fact that they're supporting them, they recognise this group as people who are making interesting things. They just absolutely knocked it apart. And then, of course, it came to the moment where they brought out Xbox Man and beat him to a pulp, which is basically what they did. And I actually remember saying to Sam afterwards, I was like, I'm still not convinced, because I always thought before, when all the dust had settled, Xbox One and PS4, they were basically going to be the same console, and it would just be down to games and stuff like that. But afterwards, I did still think that maybe there was something that they weren't telling us, because now it just seems a little too good to be true. For a moment in our PS4 podcast where news was breaking and then it broke again and we would go and ahhing, I thought maybe that's where the bad news was coming from. But no, they've gone back and they said basically it's been the exact same as it is now, which is fantastic. And what also I think is quite impressive is, as we've talked here before, I'm not big handheld fan. I don't have any handheld consoles. I've never really had a handheld console at all. I think since the original Game Boy, I've never had one. But after this conference, I'm seriously considering Vita as a viable purchase, both for the games that they're offering on it, but also its interaction with the PS4. Because now I'm thinking that I will be buying a PS4. I'm looking at the Vita and thinking, actually, that looks pretty nifty. I can sit on the sofa and play my PS4 games using that. And I've always thought it's a great piece of kit, but I've never thought I'm not going to play it. I'm not going to use it. I'm now starting to look at it with another eye. I'm starting to look at it and think, yeah, that might be a decent purchase for myself, which I never imagined thinking before this E3. So I have to say, hands down, Sony have won this. Even though, to begin with, I thought Xbox was going to walk away with it. I've been proven well and truly wrong.
You said it yourself, Pete. You said, that Sony conference is a really highly directed and polished piece of work. And I think that they spent long and hard about the language that they were going to use. I mean, they came out and they started off straight away by talking about, the fact they got 14 studios that they support directly around the world. And and at the start of this podcast, we talked about the fact that Nintendo, and you think about Nintendo just almost literally on an island, just operating all on their own, whereas you got a company like Sony developing in pockets and areas all around the world. Other numbers, they were trotting out the fact that there will be 100 games out for the PS4 within the first year. And then I think the quote that did it for me was when they were talking about how about used games, and the exec at the time said they don't want to devalue the product, and that we as gamers, we own that product and we can do what we like with it. And there was always this emphasis for Sony of putting us first and saying, we are doing all this for you. Everything from now is building up and it's for you. And it's hard not to feel warm and glowy when a big corporation is coming out and patting you on the tummy and saying, we're doing all this for you. So yeah, it's all good, isn't it?
It is. I won't repeat what's been said here, but yeah, I think Sony had a really good conference. It's certainly not been a perfect one for anybody. I think that we'll certainly see more from Microsoft, and I think they've got something. They've definitely got some bits and pieces up their sleeves, and probably some more games to show us, and maybe even a price to change.
The thing is, Microsoft are not stupid, and that's the thing which is nagging at me in the back of my mind, is that they've had the meetings, they've had the conferences, they've tested the market on all these questions like charging licenses for used games, always on 24-hour connection, and let's not forget that charging for used games is down to the developers to apply those licenses. It's not a mandatory stipulation, so it might not happen. It will, but it might not. So, and they've obviously come to these discussions against obviously what the market research is telling us, and anyone who's watched The Apprentice knows never to go against the market research. But anyway, but my point is that Microsoft are not stupid, and they've done all this for a reason. And comments today that the Microsoft exec said, he mentioned the words future proofing and all these kind of things. And there's you're right, Peter. There's something more that this console is going to be able to give us, and the architecture that's built in to do this 24-hour connection and use game licensing, it's going to play a part.
Absolutely, and whatever that new thing is for any of these consoles, for any of these companies, InRetroSpect is going to be there. And you'll find all of the information on all of this good stuff on InRetroSpectPodcast.com, because I'm going to leave you now. We're going to leave you, and we're going to stop doing a podcast because we've done hours and hours of this stuff now. So we've covered E3 pretty well. I think we might do it again next year, maybe. Let's say. But if you've liked any of this, then head on over to InRetroSpectPodcast.com. We've got a brand new comment system that's been put in there, and it's very nice and very universal. So you can leave us a comment, let us know what you think of these shows, whether or not what you want to see more of, that sort of thing. And what did you think of E3? We want to get your thoughts as well. You can find out all of the thoughts of the In Retrospect Gremlin on Twitter, if you like. Twitter.com/InRetweetSpect. It's not very pleasant, most of the stuff that he says, but there you go. Facebook, you can search for In Retrospect Podcast, and come and give our page a like, and you'll always be kept up to date with when the new show is out. Likewise, if you are subscribed to us on iTunes, that will do roughly the same thing. And if you are on there, then give us a review and a 5-star rating, and just say, yeah, I love it, I love what you do, because that does really, really help. Can I just
say one disclaimer about our shows?
Yeah, okay.
Is that unfortunately, to listen to In Retrospect, if you want to listen straight off the site, unfortunately, you're going to need a always-on internet connection. And kind of once you've got them, you can't really give it to someone else. So you just have to tell that person.
Well, I think we lost. I think we lost E3, didn't we?
I think we did lose E3.
I think we lost E3.
Breaking news.
That was a fiasco. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us, listeners, and we will be back very shortly with some more regularly scheduled In Retrospect programming. So thank you, Dan and Sam, for joining me on another one of these shows.
Thank you for having me. It's been a fun time.
Good, I'm glad.
I have friends.
Yeah, I'm glad. Sam, cheers, mate. Cheers, mate. Yeah, cheers. And thank you, listeners, again. And we will speak to you all very shortly. Goodbye.